Emma sat at the edge of the couch, her voice trembling as she asked Noah why he'd ignored her calls all night. His eyes softened, too soft, too rehearsed. "You're overreacting again?" Noah said, his tone calm, surgical. "You always do this." The word always pierced deeper than any insult. Emma wanted to believe him. She wanted the world he described, one where she was too emotional. Too sensitive wasn't the truth, but maybe it was. He smiled, brushing her hair back as he said, "I love you, but you really need to stop creating drama." A silence filled the room, thick as guilt. In that moment, Emma felt the ground shift, not beneath her feet, but inside her mind. She whispered, "I just wanted to know if you were okay." Noah exhaled like it burdened him. "And now you've made it about you again." The warmth in his eyes cooled. Emma apologized, though she didn't know for what. Emma replayed the conversation in her head long after Noah had gone to bed. His words looped like a cruel melody. "You always twist things." She sat at the kitchen counter, phone in hand, scrolling through their messages, searching for evidence she wasn't crazy. Each text seemed normal, each reply from him calm, reasonable, as though her pain had been imagined. A pit grew in her stomach when she whispered to herself, "It wasn't like that." The echo in the quiet kitchen was her only witness. The gaslight burned unseen, subtle, patient, relentless. Upstairs, Noah's footsteps shifted in the dark, and the sound made her heart race, not from fear of harm, but from fear of doubt. That was his power. She no longer trusted her own truth. The next morning, Noah greeted her with that same easy smile, the one that used to feel safe. "Row night?" he asked. Tone, syrup smooth. Emma hesitated, gauging whether honesty was still allowed. "I just couldn't sleep," she said. He leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand. "You know, if you stopped overthinking everything, maybe you'd be happier." She wanted to argue, to ask how he could say that after last night, but his voice was steady, unshakable. "I didn't do anything, Emma," he added softly. "You just keep imagining fights that don't exist." His calm was terrifying. It erased her reality with every word. She smiled back weakly, nodding because resisting him meant losing her peace entirely. When Emma mentioned lunch with Maya later that day, Noah's reaction was instant, a subtle shift in his tone. "Didn't we plan to spend the day together?" he asked, though they hadn't. "It's just lunch," Emma replied, trying to sound casual. He smiled faintly. "You've been distant lately. Maybe you need space from me." The guilt twisted fast. "No, that's not it," she rushed to say. "I just miss my friend." He sighed like a martyr. "I just thought we were getting closer again." His words wrapped around her throat like silk, soft, suffocating. Emma canceled lunch a few minutes later, her thumbs shaking over the screen. When she told him, Noah kissed her forehead, whispering, "That's my girl." It didn't sound like affection. It sounded like ownership. That night, Emma dreamed she was apologizing over and over, without knowing why. When she woke, Noah's arm was erased. For a moment, she felt safe again, until his whisper slid through the dark. "You really have to stop making me the bad guy." Her chest tightened. He was asleep, yet speaking, or maybe not. She stared at the ceiling, the words echoing in her head like a haunting. In the morning, she'd question if it even happened. That was the cruelest part, the blurring. Every line between truth and illusion faded until she no longer knew which version of reality belonged to her. And in that confusion, Noah always found his way back to control. Maya's call came at noon, cheerful, grounding, but Emma hesitated to answer. Noah's words from the morning still echoed. "You don't need people who poison your peace." The phone buzzed again. He'd said it with care, like advice, but the message beneath was a warning. She finally declined the call, typing, "Busy, you'll call later." Later never came. When Noah came home, she mentioned the missed call casually. His smile was faint. "Good," he said, pouring wine. "I hate how she makes you doubt yourself." The words sank like stones in water. Emma smiled back, because resistance felt dangerous now, not physically, but emotionally, like stepping off a ledge into a fog that had no ground. She didn't see the walls closing in. They looked too much like love. Noah began managing the small details, a suggestion here, a reminder there, until Emma's world quietly revolved around him. When she mentioned needing time to write, he smiled. "Of course, but let's have dinner first. You can write later." Later never came. Days blurred into routines shaped by his rhythm. Her journal sat unopened, gathering dust beside his books. When Maya texted again, Noah noticed the faint smile that crossed Emma's lips. "You're still talking to her?" he asked, not angry, just disappointed. The disappointment hurt more than anger ever could. "She just checks in," Emma said softly. "That's all." He nodded, then took her hand. "I just want to protect you from people who don't understand us." It sounded noble. It always did. By the third week, Emma realized she hadn't spoken to anyone but Noah. He'd started picking her up from work, cooking for her, making sure she rested. It felt kind until she noticed the timing. The moments he appeared were always when she planned something without him. When she suggested meeting Ryan and Maya together, Noah's reaction was effortless. "You can, of course," he said with a light laugh. "But I'm sure they'll twist things. They never liked how close we are." His calm tone made her feel childish for questioning him. That night she deleted the group chat. Her phone felt lighter, and so did her mind. Maybe peace wasn't freedom after all, but the quiet you're allowed to keep. Emma started to notice how quiet her phone had become. Notifications vanished, messages unseen. Even Maya's profile seemed buried beneath the algorithm of neglect. One night, she tried to bring it up. "I feel cut off," she said. Noah smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You've been calmer lately," he said. "Happier too. Maybe that's a sign." The logic tangled in her chest. How could happiness come from silence? Yet she nodded, because disagreeing only led to more explanations she couldn't win. In the reflection of his eyes, she saw the version of herself he wanted: soft, compliant, quiet, the kind of woman who didn't question, only trusted. And trust, in his hands, had become the most beautiful form of control. One night, while Noah showered, Emma opened her laptop, a rebellion wrapped in hesitation. She searched emotional manipulation, and her pulse quickened as she read. The words matched too well. Gaslighting, control, withdrawal. Her cursor hovered over the phrase, signs of abuse. A floorboard creaked. She slammed the laptop shut just as Noah entered, towel around his shoulders, smile effortless. "Still awake?" he asked. "You worry too much." She forced a laugh, hiding the truth behind her ribs. As he leaned down to kiss her forehead, she caught his reflection in the dark screen, calm, confident, certain, and realized how much of herself she'd erased trying to keep that look in his eyes. It began with a notebook. A plain, spiral-bound thing she bought on impulse, claiming it was for work notes. But when she opened it late at night, the truth poured out faster than she could stop it. "He makes me feel small. Then he calls it love." She wrote until her hand cramped. Each word felt like betrayal, not of him, but of the story she'd built around him. The next morning, Noah found the notebook on her desk. "What's this?" he asked lightly. Her pulse stopped. "Just thoughts," she said, too quickly. He smiled, handed it back, and kissed her forehead. "You overthink everything, Emma." He walked away, but the way he said her name, slow, deliberate, made her realize he hadn't read it. He memorized it. The next day, Noah surprised her with breakfast pancakes. Strawberries, The works. You've been stressed, he said, sliding a plate toward her. His gestures were perfect, his timing surgical. You know, I just want us to be happy. She nodded, grateful for peace, even if it felt rehearsed. But when she reached for her phone, it wasn't on the counter. I left it in the other room, Noah said, smiling. You don't need it right now. The air stilled. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the faint smirk beneath his charm. For the first time, Emma realized that every kind word carried a leash, and she had been mistaking obedience for love. She forced a smile, but inside something finally cracked. By evening, Emma sat in her car outside a cafe, notebook on her lap, heart racing. She hadn't told Noah she was out. It felt dangerous, like running without shoes. She opened the journal and read what she'd written: every manipulation, every moment of confusion, each apology she'd been forced to give. The words stared back like evidence. She imagined showing it to someone, maybe Maya, maybe even the police, and felt both power and fear. Her phone buzzed. Noah, where are you? She stared at the screen. The message wasn't a question. It was a warning. The air thickened. She closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "Not tonight." Then she drove home, faster than she meant to, tears blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold. Noah noticed the shift, the way she watched him differently, the silence in her replies. One night, he asked, "Do you still love me?" His tone was gentle, almost mournful. "Of course I do," she said automatically, but even she didn't believe it. "Then prove it," he whispered. "Stop writing things that make us look broken." Emma froze. He'd found the notebook again. Her throat closed. "It's just notes," she lied. "It doesn't mean anything." Noah smiled faintly, eyes dark. "Then why hide it?" The room seemed to shrink, air thinning around her. He touched her cheek, voice soft as poison. "You don't need words to be understood, Emma. You just need me." She nodded, not from agreement, but survival. Emma didn't sleep that night. She sat in the bathroom, the only place Noah never entered, listening to the quiet drip of the faucet. She opened her phone and searched again. Signs of gaslighting. The list mirrored her life perfectly. She read each line, tears falling silently, not from sadness, but clarity. The lies were too patterned, too precise. She began recording small voice notes. Arguments, tone shifts, his calm denials. Her hands trembled, but her resolve steadied. For the first time in years, she felt something sharp inside her, not fear, not anger, but the faint beginning of defiance. She looked at her reflection in the mirror and whispered, "You're not crazy." It was the first true thing she'd said in a long time. The first time Emma pressed record. Her hands shook so badly she almost stopped. It wasn't for proof, not yet. It was for remembrance. Her voice, raw and quiet, filled the small space of the bedroom like a ghost returning home. "He says I make things up," she whispered. "But I remember everything." She spoke in fragments: the night he turned silence into punishment, the mornings he made guilt sound like care. Every word echoed like confession and rebirth. When Noah called from the other room, she ended the recording, heart pounding. For a moment, she thought she'd erase it. But she didn't. That voice, her own, was the first sound of something he couldn't twist. Over the next week, she recorded quietly at night, her voice growing steadier with each entry. The words no longer trembled. They began to accuse. "I've started to see how he changes the ending of every story," she said into the phone. "How I become the villain." Each admission felt dangerous, but also cleansing, as if naming the shadows made them lose shape. During the day, Noah was affectionate again, calling her baby, kissing her forehead, asking if she was happy. She said yes, though the lie burned. The more she recorded, the more she understood. Love shouldn't make you doubt the sound of your own voice. One night, Noah found her awake at 2 a.m., staring at her phone. Couldn't sleep? He asked, voice lined with suspicion. Emma smiled, too calm. Just journaling. He reached for her phone, and for a heartbeat she froze, but she didn't flinch. You don't trust me? She asked, tone delicate, dangerous. He paused, confused by the shift. Of course I do, he said, returning it with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. When he left, she opened the recorder again. He lies with tenderness, she whispered, but I've learned his language now. The words felt heavy, final, like pressing a knife to the illusion. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid of being caught. She felt ready. The recordings evolved no longer just stories, but strategy. Emma began capturing her thoughts right after every conversation, mapping patterns of manipulation like a detective tracing evidence. He apologizes only when I cry, she recorded softly. Not because he means it, because it resets the game. She layered her truth in files named like memories. Morning calm, dinner apology, the silence. The phone became a diary, a witness, a mirror. When Noah noticed her distance, he tried to draw her back in with gifts and gentle control. But something in her eyes had changed, a quiet defiance he couldn't decode. She was no longer living inside his narrative. She was writing her own. It happened the night she caught her reflection and didn't look away. The phone rested on the dresser, recording. Noah stood behind her, asking why she'd been so distant lately. His voice was sugar, his questions knives. But Emma didn't defend, didn't explain. She simply looked at herself in the mirror and said softly, because I finally hear myself again. Noah blinked, confused, maybe threatened by her calm. He reached out to touch her shoulder, but she stepped aside. You're tired, she said evenly. We'll talk tomorrow. When he left the room, Emma let out a trembling breath. The recorder was still running, capturing the silence that followed, the first silence that belonged entirely to her. Emma woke that morning to sunlight instead of fear. It was strange how silence could feel peaceful now. Noah made coffee, speaking softly about nothing important, but his words no longer carried weight. Each syllable fell flat, like a script she'd already memorized. When he asked, "You okay?" she smiled faintly. Better than I have been in a long time. He hesitated, searching for the weakness that wasn't there. She didn't flinch, didn't fill the silence with apologies. Inside her chest, something steady had replaced the tremor awareness. He didn't know that every manipulation, every quiet cruelty, had already lost its grip. For the first time, she looked him in the eye and felt nothing but distance, the clean, sharp kind that comes right before freedom. At work, Emma laughed genuinely for the first time in months. Her coworkers noticed. She mentioned a new project, an idea she wanted to pitch. When Noah texted, "Where are you?" she didn't answer immediately. The world outside their apartment felt different, louder, alive. During lunch, she opened her voice recordings, listening not to the pain, but to the strength hidden inside each word. It was her voice that saved her, calm, honest, unbroken. She realized she didn't need him to confess or change. She only needed to believe herself. When she finally replied to his message, she wrote just 2 words, running late. And for the first time, she meant it. She was running late for the life she'd almost missed. That evening, Noah sensed the shift. He reached for her hand at dinner, but she withdrew gently, pretending to check her phone. "You've changed," he said, tone mild, eyes searching. "Maybe," she replied, smiling. "Maybe I'm remembering who I was." His fork paused mid-air. The room seemed smaller now, but not because of fear, because she'd outgrown it. Every time he tried to steer the conversation back to guilt, she let the silence stand. That was the one language he couldn't master. For the first time, she realized control only worked when she agreed to play along. And tonight, she was done playing. That night, Emma stood by the window, city lights flickering beyond the glass. Her reflection looked back, tired, yes, but no longer lost. She opened the voice recorder one last time. "I'm done giving my silence to someone who feeds on it," she said softly. "Tomorrow, I'll start again. She didn't know what that meant, yet an apartment, a friend's couch, a new city, but she knew she'd walk toward something light. Behind her, Noah's voice called from the other room, asking if she was coming to bed. Soon, she answered. Her tone was calm, almost kind. She looked out again, whispering to herself, just one more sunrise. Morning arrived quietly, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Emma packed a small bag, essentials only. She didn't rush, didn't shake. When Noah asked where she was going, she smiled. Out! It was the simplest, truest word she'd ever spoken. He laughed, thinking it was temporary. But she didn't correct him. Some truths don't need to be argued, they unfold. As she closed the door behind her, sunlight spilled across the hallway, and for the first time in years, she didn't look back. The air outside was cold, sharp, honest. She breathed it in, her pulse steady. Every step away from him wasn't escape, it was return. Emma hadn't meant to tell anyone. But when Maya asked, "Are you really okay?" the answer slipped out like breath finally released. She spoke softly at first, half sentences, small truths, then all at once. Every quiet cruelty, every twist of blame. Maya didn't interrupt. She just listened. Eyes glassy but fierce. "You know this isn't your fault, right?" she said. The words hit harder than any insult Noah had ever given her. For the first time, Emma realized the story could exist outside his version of it. She wasn't crazy. She was heard. The sound of her own truth in someone else's silence was louder than any recording could ever be. Maya urged her to share more, not for vengeance, but closure. That evening, Emma uploaded a short voice note to a private support forum, anonymous yet raw. When someone rewrites your memories, you forget how to trust yourself. Her voice echoed. Responses flooded in, strangers saying, "Me too. I thought I was alone." Each message built a bridge out of her isolation. The shame that once anchored her began to dissolve. She didn't need to prove Noah wrong anymore. She needed to prove herself right. The truth wasn't meant to destroy him. It was meant to free her. Word spread quietly among friends who had once believed Noah's charm. Ryan reached out first. "I didn't see it," he admitted, voice breaking over the phone. "I'm sorry." Emma didn't need his apology, but hearing it mended something small inside her. Noah's stories about her instability no longer held power. They were unraveling in the light of too many witnesses. She realized truth doesn't roar. It lingers patient until it's undeniable. The web he'd woven began to thin, thread by thread, undone not by confrontation, but by clarity. Emma met with a counselor the next week. She expected judgment. Instead, she found understanding. "You don't owe anyone your silence," the counselor said. Emma smiled faintly. "I used to think love meant staying," she replied. "Now I know it means letting go." The room felt lighter, her breathing slower. She spoke of the recordings, the fear, the confusion. But this time the story ended differently. She was the survivor, not the victim. Healing didn't sound dramatic. It sounded steady, like footsteps finally matching their own rhythm. Weeks later, Emma walked past a familiar street corner and saw Noah from afar, laughing with someone new. For a heartbeat, old memories stirred then vanished. She didn't feel hatred, only distance. The story was no longer theirs. It belonged to her alone. Pulling out her phone, she scrolled through her recordings, hesitated, and deleted them one by one. Each file vanished like a chapter closing. The city moved around her, indifferent and alive. When she looked up, sunlight struck her face, and she smiled, small, certain, unbroken. Truth had exposed him, but it had redeemed her. Emma moved into her new apartment on a Sunday morning. The air smelled of fresh paint and possibility. She unpacked slowly, no longer rushing to fill the silence. The walls were blank, waiting, not empty, but forgiving. As she placed a small plant on the windowsill, her reflection in the glass looked back, not haunted, just human. She caught herself humming a tune she hadn't realized she still remembered. It was strange how healing didn't come as fireworks or epiphanies, but in quiet, ordinary acts. Setting a mug down, opening a curtain, choosing peace over permission. For the first time, her life fit again, not around someone else, but within herself. Weeks later, Emma met Maya at the same cafe where everything had started. "You look different," Maya said. "Lighter," Emma smiled, sipping her coffee. "I stopped apologizing for existing." They laughed, not out of pity, but joy. The conversation flowed easily, no longer orbiting pain. They talked about travel, art, the small things that made days beautiful. When Maya asked if she'd ever see Noah again, Emma shrugged. "Maybe, but he's just a person now, not a story I live inside." Her words sounded simple but felt monumental. Healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about remembering without bleeding. Emma returned to writing. The journal that once held fear now filled with plans, ideas for a book, a story about finding one's voice. Each page felt lighter, freer. She no longer needed to document pain, she wrote to celebrate survival. Her sentences carried rhythm again. Her words no longer whispered. One evening she read an entry aloud. "I used to think silence kept me safe. Now I know it only kept me small." She smiled, closing the notebook. The truth had changed shape from confession to creation. And in that transformation, she realized healing wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of authorship. On a quiet evening walk, Emma passed the park where she and Noah once argued. The bench was still there, unchanged. She sat for a while, listening to wind move through the trees, realizing she no longer carried his voice inside her. The world sounded different, larger, kinder. She whispered a silent goodbye, not to him, but to the version of herself who once thought love meant enduring pain. The sky deepened into twilight. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Closure, she learned, isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just peace, finally unopposed. Months later, Emma stood before a small audience at a community reading. She read from her essay not about Noah, but about reclaiming one's voice. Her words flowed steady and sure. When you start believing your story again, you stop living in someone else's version. Applause filled the room, gentle but sincere. She caught Maya's proud smile in the crowd and felt tears threaten, not from pain but gratitude. As she stepped off the stage, she realized that freedom wasn't the absence of fear, it was walking forward despite it. The chapter of survival had ended. The story of living had just begun.